Book of Heaven, Volume 16, Part 6. November 20th, 1923. Jesus reassures Luisa in her fears, as she must not be concerned about thoughts, but about facts. The divine will is celestial air for the soul, that makes everything rise again, fortifies, orders, and sanctifies everything. I felt a fear about what I was writing, and I thought to myself, what shall my confusion be on the day of judgment, if instead of being my Jesus, he who speaks to me, it were my fantasy, or the infernal enemy? My Jesus, I feel I am dying at the mere thought of it. And you know the great repugnance I feel in writing. If it wasn't for blessed obedience, I would not have written a single word. And I felt such confusion that if it had been in my power, I would have burned up everything. Now, while I was in this state, my always adorable Jesus came out from within my interior as a little child, and placing his little head upon my shoulder, he clung to my face and said to me, "My daughter, why do you fear? You must not be concerned about thoughts, but about facts. Is it perhaps not true that your will, embracing mine, wants to find everyone in order to bind them to my will? To retie all the broken bonds between the human will and the divine? Exposing yourself to defend and excuse the creatures, and to repair the Creator? This is indeed a fact in you. Is it perhaps not true that you swore you wanted to live in my will, pronouncing a yes? Ah, that yes is a chain for you that keeps you bound within my will. And as you take delight in it, it makes you abhor the shadow of your will. This is a fact, and then many other things that you know. If you were writing but the life, the facts of what you write were not in you, then you could have feared, and I would have given you neither strength, nor light, nor assistance. On the contrary, you would have become dull and could not have gone further. Therefore, calm yourself and continue to live as though needed in my will, in order to expand the boundaries of your human will within mine. See, my humanity was also little, and kept growing as though needed with the divine will, in such a way that, as I would grow, so would my human will, living together with the divine, expand its boundaries within the will of the Eternal One, and prepare the redemption and the Fiat voluntas tua on earth as it is in heaven. And you, don't you want to follow my growth and your flight in my will? My will is not only life, but is air of the soul. And if air is missing to life, one's nature begins to decline. The breathing is hampered. The heart is hindered in its beating. The blood circulation is irregular. The intelligence becomes numb. The eye almost lifeless. The voice choked. The strengths are lost. What is it that casts so much chaos into human life? The lack of air. So a balsamic air can restore order and vigor to one's nature. All this is caused by one's own will, that, like bad air, produces chaos, irregularity, weakness, and the decline of what is good in the soul. And if it is not helped with the celestial air of my will, that makes everything rise again, fortifies, orders, sanctifies everything, the human life shall be a life half extinguished, disordered, and on the slope of evil. November 24th, 1923. The Story of the Divine Will. How the Most Holy Virgin, for the work of redemption, made all the acts of the divine will her own, and prepared the food for her children. This is why she is Mother and Queen of the divine will. Luisa must do the same for the work of the Fiat Voluntas Tua. I was doing the hour of the Passion, in which my sorrowful mamma received her son, dead, into her arms, and placed him in the sepulchre. In my interior I was saying, "My mamma, together with Jesus, I place all souls into your arms, that you may recognize them all as your children, inscribe them one by one into your heart, and place them inside the wounds of Jesus. They are the children of your immense sorrow, and this is enough for you to recognize them and love them. And I want to place all generations in the supreme will, so that no one may be missing. And in the name of all, I give you comforts, compassions, and divine reliefs." Now, while I was saying this, my sweet Jesus moved in my interior and told me, "My daughter, if you knew with what food my sorrowful mamma nourished all these children." And I, "What was it, O my Jesus?" And he again, "Since you are my little one, chosen by me for the mission of my will, and you live in that fiat in which you were created, I want to make known to you the story of my eternal will, its joys and its sorrows, its effects, its immense value, what it did, what it received, and the one who took to heart its defense." The little ones are more attentive in listening to me, because their minds are not filled with other things. They are as though empty of everything, and if one wants to give them a different food, they feel disgusted, because being little, they are used to taking only the milk of my will. That more than loving mother keeps them attached to its divine breast to nourish them abundantly. And they remain with their little mouths opened, waiting for the milk of my teachings, and I amuse myself very much. Oh, how beautiful it is to see them, now smiling, now rejoicing, now crying, in hearing me narrate the story of my will. Well then, the origin of my will is eternal. Never did sorrow enter into it. Among the divine persons, this will was in highest concord. Even more, it was one. In each act it admitted, both ad intra and ad extra. It gave us infinite joys, new contentments, immense happiness. And when we wanted to issue the machine of creation, how much glory, how many harmonies and honor did it not give to us? As soon as the Fiat was released, this Fiat diffused our beauty, our light, our power, order, harmony, love, sanctity, everything. And we remained glorified by our own virtues in seeing, by means of our Fiat, the flowering of our divinity veiled in the whole universe. Our will did not stop. Swollen with love as it was, it wanted to create man. And you know his story. Therefore, I move forward. It was he who caused the first sorrow to my will. He tried to embitter he who loved him so much and who had made him happy. My will wept more than a tender mother who weeps over her son, who is crippled and blind only because he withdrew from the will of his mother. My will wanted to be the first actor in man, for nothing else but to give him new surprises of love, of joys, of happiness, of light, of riches. It wanted to always give. This is why it wanted to act. But man wanted to do his will and broke it from the divine. If only he had never done that. My will withdrew, and he fell into the abyss of all evils. Now, in order to rejoin these two wills, one was needed who would contain a divine will within himself. Therefore, since I, eternal Word, loved this man with an eternal love, we, the divine persons, decreed together that I was to take on human flesh in order to come and save him, and to rejoin the two broken wills. But where to descend? Who would be he who would lend her flesh to her Creator? This is why we chose one creature, and by virtue of the foreseen merits of the future Redeemer, she was exempted from original sin. Her will and ours were one. It was this celestial creature who understood the story of our will. We narrated everything to her, as to a little one, the sorrow of our will, and how, by breaking his will from ours, ungrateful man had constrained our will within the divine circle, almost hampering it in its designs, preventing it from communicating to him its goods and the purpose for which he had been created. For us, to give is to make ourselves happy, as well as the one who receives from us. It is to enrich without being impoverished. It is to give what we are by nature, forming it in the creature by grace. It is to go out of ourselves to give what we possess. By giving, our love pours itself out. Our will makes feast. If we were not to give, why would we form the creation? So the mere being unable to give to our children, to our dear images, was like a mourning for our supreme will. Just in seeing man operate, speak, walk, without the connection of our will, because it had been broken by him, and that currents of graces, of light, of sanctity, of science, and so forth, would run to him had he been with us, but could not. Our will took the attitude of sorrow. In each act of creature, there was a sorrow for us, because we saw that act empty of divine value, without beauty and sanctity, completely dissimilar from our acts. Oh, how the celestial little one understood this highest sorrow of ours, and the great evil of man in withdrawing from our will. Oh, how many times she cried hot tears because of our sorrow, and because of the great misfortune of man. Therefore, fearing, she did not want to concede even one act of life to her own will. This is why she remained little. Because her will had no life in her, how could she become grown up? But that which she did not do, our will did. It raised her, all beautiful, holy, divine. It enriched her so much as to make of her the greatest of all. She was a prodigy of our will, a prodigy of grace, of beauty, of sanctity. But she remained always little, so much so that she would never descend from our arms. And taking to heart our defense, she repaid all the sorrowful acts of the supreme will. And not only was she completely in order with our will, but she made all the acts of creatures her own. Absorbing into herself all our will rejected by them, she repaired it, she loved it, and keeping it as though deposited within her virginal heart, she prepared the food of our will for all creatures. Do you see, then, with what food this most loving mother nourishes her children? It cost her all her life, unheard of pains, the very life of her son, to form within herself the abundant deposit of this food of my will, and to keep it ready to nourish all her children, as tender and loving mother. She could not love her children more. By giving them this food, her love had reached the ultimate degree. Therefore, among the many titles that she has, the most beautiful title that could be given to her is that of Mother and Queen of the Divine Will. Now, my daughter, if my mamma did this for the work of redemption, so must you for the work of the Fiat Voluntas Tua. Your will must have no life in you, and making all the acts of my will for each creature your own, you shall deposit them within yourself. And while repaying my will in the name of all, you shall form within yourself all the necessary food to nourish all generations with the food of my will. Each saying, each effect, each additional knowledge about it, shall be one more taste that they shall find in this food, in such a way that they shall eat it with avidity. Everything I tell you about my volition shall serve to whet their appetite, and so that they may take no other food at the cost of any sacrifice. If a food were said to be good, to restore one's strengths, to heal the sick, to contain all tastes, and even more, to give life, to embellish, and make one happy, who would not make any sacrifice in order to take this food? So it shall be for my will. In order to make it loved and desired, knowledge is necessary. Therefore be attentive. Receive within yourself this deposit of my will, so that as a second mother, you may prepare the food for our children. In doing so, you shall imitate my mamma. It shall cost you much as well, but in the face of my will, any sacrifice shall seem nothing to you. Do it as a little one. Never descend from my arms. and I shall continue to narrate to you the story of my will. November 28th, 1923. The newborn of the divine will. The cross of the divine will was the largest and longest for Jesus. How each act of the human will, opposed to the divine, was a distinct cross for Jesus. I feel always sunken in the holy will of my Jesus, and I seem to see my little soul like a newborn baby, whom blessed Jesus was raising in his arms with the breath of his will, with such jealousy as to want that she look at nothing, hear nothing, touch nothing. And so that nothing might distract her, he kept her enchanted with the sweet enchantment of his teachings on his most holy will. And the little newborn would grow and be nourished with the breath of the will of her Jesus. And not only this, but he covered me with many little crosses of light, in such a way that, in looking at myself, I could see a cross of light impressed in each part of me. And Jesus amused himself, now in multiplying these crosses, now in wanting me to keep my gaze fixed on him in order to count all his words, which served me as food and means of growth. Then afterwards my Jesus told me, "My little daughter, my newborn of the divine will, my volition conceived you, made you be born, and now raises you with all love. Don't you see with how much love I hold you in my arms, and do not permit that you take any other food but the breath of my will? It is the most beautiful, the dearest, the most precious thing that has been issued in creation until now, the newborn of my will. Therefore I shall keep you with such jealousy as to let no one touch my newborn. My will shall be everything for you. It shall be life, food, garment, clothing, and cross for you, because since it is the greatest thing, it would be unbefitting for your Jesus to mix it with other things which are not a birth from our will. Therefore forget everything, so that no other waters may surround you, inside and out, but the immense sea of the eternal volition. I want in you the honor, the nobility, the decorum of the true newborn daughter of my will." On hearing this, instead of rejoicing, I felt myself die of confusion, and I only had the courage to say, "Jesus, my love, I am little, it is true. I myself see it. But I am also a bad little one. And yet you are saying all this? How can it be? Maybe you want to make fun of me. I know that many make you cry, and to be cheered from your crying, you want to amuse yourself with me by playing this joke on me. But even though I feel confusion because of your jokes, go ahead and do it, and let it be the joke of your will." And Jesus, pressing me more tightly to himself, continued, No, your Jesus does not make fun of you. I amuse myself, yes, and the sure sign that what I tell you is true is the crosses of light with which my will has marked you. Know, my daughter, that the largest, the longest cross for my humanity, that never left me, was the divine will. Even more, each act of the human will opposed to the divine was a distinct cross which the supreme will impressed in my inmost humanity. In fact, when the human will moves from the earth in order to act, the divine moves from heaven in order to encounter the human volition and make it one with its own, so as to make torrents of grace, of light, of sanctity, flow in that act. But by not receiving the encounter with the divine, the human will puts itself as though at war against its Creator, and rejects into the celestial regions the good, the light, the sanctity that He was about to pour upon it. So the Supreme Will, offended, wanted to be repaid by me, and in each act of the human will, it inflicted a cross upon me. And even though, together with the cross, I received all the good rejected by them, in order to keep it deposited within me for the time when the creature would dispose herself to receive into her acts the encounter with the divine will, in spite of this, I could not exempt myself from feeling the intense pain of so many crosses. Look at me, in my interior. How many billions of crosses my humanity contained. Therefore the crosses of my will were incalculable. Its pain was infinite, and I moaned under the weight of an infinite pain. This infinite pain had such power as to give me death at each instant, and to give me a cross for each act of the human will opposed to the divine. The cross of my will is not made of wood, that only makes one feel the weight and the pain. Rather, it is a cross of light and of fire that burns and consumes, and impresses itself in such a way as to form one single thing with one's very nature. If I wanted to tell you of the cross which my divine will gave me, I should braid all the acts of creatures, make them present to you, and let you touch with your own hand how my will, demanding fair satisfaction, inflicted on me cross upon cross. Had it perhaps not been a human will that offended the divine and broke up with it? So was now a divine will to crucify and cause pain to my human nature and will. All the rest of man can be called superficial. The font, the root, the substance of either evil or good is in the depth of his will. Therefore only the divine will could make me expiate the evil of so many human wills. This is why I want you all in my will, to make known what this divine will has done, what it made me suffer, what it wants to do. And this is why you are marked with many crosses of light, because your cross has been my will, that has changed everything into light, in order to dispose you to be the true newborn of my will, to whom I shall entrust the secrets, the joys, and the sorrows of it, as to a faithful daughter, who, uniting herself to my acts, may open the heavens to make it descend upon earth, and to make it known, received, and loved. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 16, Part 6. Fiat.